Hello, thanks again for being with us. I'm Rosemary Sadler. I'm a self-employed Black history expert, a social justice advocate, and an award-winning author. I'm a DEI consultant, and I'm very happy to be here to co-host this Black History Month event. Joining me is my co-host, Julia Brown.
Thank you, Rosemary. And what a pleasure to work with you again for the second year in a row on the Asalo International Program. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I am Julia Brown. I am the founder of Walk in the Spirit Tours and Journey. We specialize in Black heritage tourism, education, and media across Europe, Canada, and United States.
We are delighted to be here to support and share an online Black History Month event with the theme being Healing the Harms, Blackness and Impacts on Beauty, Identity, and Achievement. And we hope that you'll join us for the remaining part of our program. I'd like to offer the Land Acknowledgement before we proceed. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of many Indigenous peoples who have been living and working on the land since time immemorial. I would like to also acknowledge that this land was settled and supported very early by people of African descent, the first named African being translator Matthew da Costa by 1604, and of the ongoing and seminal contribution made by him and those who preceded and followed in Canada's development. I acknowledge the many peoples of African descent who are not settlers, but whose ancestors were forcibly displaced as part of the transatlantic slave trade, brought against their will and made to work on these lands. We must fully acknowledge and understand how our history of inequality continues to this day. We must acknowledge that Canadians of African origin were an integral part of shaping the Canadian landscape and history. Through their resilience, and our history would not be the same without the Black experience. If you're able to stand or sing along, we'll now hear from the York University Gospel Choir under the direction of Karen Burke.
And whatever your nationality, American, Canadian, European, Southeast Asian, wherever, we hope that you can join in this song and in being part of this program, this very important program today.
Ring
The theme of our program today is Healing the Harms, Blackness and Impacts on Beauty, Identity, and Achievement. In this 1-hour program, concepts of beauty and identity will be raised as well as the impact of these on academic achievement for African Canadian youth. What we're going to see here today, or what you're going to participate in, and you're really going to be able to dive deep into this, is first the trailer of an important documentary called Subjects of Desire, and then we will show you a clip that deals with mental health and illness and racism in schools and the effect on youth.
I want to thank Jennifer Holness, the producer of Subjects of Desire, for allowing us to include this trailer of the film. It's told from the point of view of women who aren't afraid to challenge conventional beauty standards, and it's set partially during the 50th anniversary of the Miss Black America pageant, which was created, as you know, as a political protest. But it's also a very Canadian film and a very global film because it explores the cultural shift in North American beauty standards towards embracing Black females' aesthetics and our features, while exposing the deliberate and often dangerous portrayals of Black women in the media. From society's new fixation on the booty and fuller lips to the dramatic rise of spray tan skin, ethnic hairstyles, and athletic bodies, some argue that Black women are having a beauty moment. But others, primarily Black women, argue that traditional Black features and attributes are seen as more desirable when they're on white women. Subjects of Desire is a culturally significant, provocative film that deconstructs what we understand about race and the power behind beauty.
We know that trailers are teasers and they really make you want to watch the film. And if you haven't been able to see the film on the film festival circuit, know that this film will be shown on TV Ontario from February the 1st forward, since TV Ontario is one of the co-producers of it. So let's watch.
I think any woman's road is easier if she's beautiful. The way I look has helped me in my life. But even my beauty doesn't change that I'm Black.
The most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the Black woman.
What I love about the Miss Black America pageant is it creates a space for us to continue to celebrate Black beauty unapologetically.
I wanted to be a part of the Miss Black America pageant. I needed to feel as though I mattered and my voice mattered.
Little white kids would always comment on your hair. Oh, it's so big. You look like a lion. You know, like you look like an animal. No one else says that to anybody else.
In the realm of beauty, Black has to be minimized.
People tell me, all right, when you gonna straighten your hair? Your hair, your hair, your hair.
When you don't love yourself, you don't love anything.
There are only 3 models for what a Black woman can be. Somebody's caretaker or maid, this over-sexualized video girl, or they're the angry Black woman. We're more than that.
In a global world, we are moving towards a very different mixed ideal.
What's considered ghetto is now popular.
The history of race is such a painful one that then to just be like, I like the way this looks. It's so dismissive.
This concept of beauty was being applied to me, but I never believed I needed to look that way. To be beautiful, to be great, to be excellent. This is what everybody comes to see anyway.
Let's keep embracing that beauty because it's always been here and it ain't going away. 'Cause I am me, you are yours, I am Black, I am beautiful.
Wasn't that a powerful film? Powerful trailer. You'll have to watch the whole film later. But I think that what we can glean from what we've just seen is the important role that the Miss Black America Beauty Contest had when it started some 40 years ago. It was basically a protest because the Miss America pageant failed to include contestants of African origin, or if they managed to slip in, they just never seemed to get too far. And I should add here that in Canada, in the 1930s, as part of the celebration and commemoration of the end of the date that we mark as the end of slavery in this country, which is August 1st, 1834, there was a pageant held as part of the festivities called the Miss International Sepia pageant in the Windsor area. And under the support and stewardship of Walter Perry, many of these young women were able to win money, scholarships, and had, but it was incredibly local. But the reality is, in order for us to be affirmed in our own beauty and excellence, we had to do it ourselves.
And the fact is that Black women were not allowed on stage after that, before that first Black Miss America contest. So they had to, like you said, Rosemary, they had to take things into their own hands. And you think back to 1968 when that happened. What was it like for Black women? But if we think about leading up, in the film, we see young women, we see women who are in their 20s and 30s. And what would it have been like for them in that age, 1968? But even if we go a little further, like I would have been 11 years old at the time. And for me to see a Black woman on screen or in a public place that way, it was so unexpected and so unusual that it would have been like a fluke. So when I was that age, what did I think of being a Black girl? It was, I didn't fit in anywhere. I grew up at that time. I just moved to Canada. I grew up in England, and there certainly weren't any Black women anywhere around, and in any public places. And so I grew up in a small town in Ontario, in Kitchener actually, and it's a German town. So there were no other Black women, Black girls around. And so I had to model my own sense of myself. And what sense of myself did I actually have? Whatever I wanted to be, the only thing in front of me was white girls with long hair. And I certainly didn't have it. And, Jennifer Holness, the director of this film, has mentioned that that one of the common things that Black girls grew up doing, and I knew they did it later too, back probably in the 90s and probably later, was putting something on your head, like a towel, or in my case, with my sisters, we took leotards and we put them on our head, and then we could braid them, and they were long and they would move around, and we could flip them around just like our friends did. And just the sense that we were missing something in our lives, and as being Black meant we were lacking in something. We were lacking in that sense of who we were, and having no reflection. So we couldn't even decide what we wanted to look like. We just had to follow the model. And anyway, did you actually want to be different from anybody else? And I know that in my case, we didn't. And I have to say that, there was a Black girl in my school when I was in high school, and I didn't talk to her because I didn't want anybody to notice that I was Black, and to have at that point in your life, you're in high school, to have no sense of yourself, but also to have a sense that people can actually see you as Black, and that you don't want that to be reflected. You don't want them to think of you that way. It's disappointing when you think back on it, but it's also very scarring and very traumatizing. And we all know that we've carried that trauma with us, and that's a part that's dealt with in the film. And Jennifer also says that she's noticed that her own daughters, who are probably in their early 20s, grew up with that same sense of anguish of being a Black girl. So has anything really changed since then, since the 1960s? What do you think, Rosemary?
Well, you've raised so many really good points, Julia. And like you, my experience of being a Black woman in this country, a Black girl in this country, was very much the same. I think that for a lot of people, they may not realize how the Black population is so very different, in not just in composition and numbers, but in the way it's set up. George Eliot Clark, a poet, recently said that we didn't have a Black belt, we had Black pockets. And so that meant that there were very many Black communities scattered all over the place, small communities, particularly throughout Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, but also within Ontario. But even a city like Toronto, where I grew up, we were scattered again in terms of neighborhood. So the neighborhood that I grew up in Toronto, we were the Black family. Even though Toronto had a somewhat substantial Black population. But that didn't matter, because my lived experience Monday to Saturday was of no Black representation, no Black people in the neighborhood, no Black people in the local stores, no Black teachers, no fellow Black students, and certainly no Black people in the newspapers or magazines that we were looking at, except when my parents would get their issue of Ebony magazine. So on Sunday, I had the opportunity to go to a Black church. And at the time, there were really 3 incredibly large and predominant Black churches that had evolved from Underground Railroad and the establishment of Black churches in Canada, roughly in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. And it was at that Black church that I had the opportunity to see a range of people who looked like me, the rainbow, from people who could pass for white all the way through to people who could never pass for white, from people who were professionals to people who were working as domestics or doing other kinds of more menial labor, not because they weren't bright, curious, and articulate, but because they were denied the opportunities either for the training or the entry into those other areas of work. I think that it's really important for people to remember that while we did not necessarily have large populations, we had populations. I remember the first time I saw a Black person on TV, I think it was probably Hattie McDaniels, and she was frantically worried about, taking care of the white people in her charge, given the role that she was playing as a maid in the Deep South.
And that was one of the roles a Black women were allowed to play, taking care of other women, other people.
Mm-hmm. And I would cringe at school when there would be the reading of particular books.
Yes.
Or when there would be the infamous slave auctions that would be opportunities in high school to raise money. And then people wondered why I never participated in those slave auctions. It's a really complicated matter, but because the next part of our program is going to have to do with academic achievement, let me just shift a little bit into that, because I know that when a critical point in moving forward with your education comes around grade 6, 7, 8, when you're making decisions about where you'll go for high school and what training you might be looking for after. And I know what my marks were, and they were good. I know what my friends' marks were, and they were the same. And I was encouraged to go into a non-university bound program and consider being a secretary. My white friends, of course they were white, everybody in my school was white, many of them were encouraged to go to university. And so thankfully, I didn't personally listen to what I was being told, because I intended to go to university. And in fact, I became the first person in my family when I got my first degree to have done so. But that didn't mean that the doors are wide open for me. And I just want people to put that into a context. It isn't just about how you look and, if you're cute or not. It's about how you are going to be able to negotiate a way to make money for yourself, to take care of yourself going forward, based on the stereotypes that are held about people who look like you.
But how you look, how you feel about how you look is so very, it forms the ground floor, even the foundation of how you act within the world and how you present within the world. So if you, for example, when you're young and you're with your friends and they're whatever ethnic group they're from, are you comfortable in presenting yourself? And I feel like girls today may be more comfortable in mixed environments because of the predominance now or the appearance of more black women, but black women aesthetics, but also mixed race women's aesthetics, which is held maybe even higher and reflects back to the slave days and slave masters and the children that came out of that. So there's so many stories, there's so many things to unpack, but when you're young and you start going to school, you don't necessarily know all of that all of that is the background. And you don't know that those conditions the lives of enslaved people beforehand are actually the conditions that you are living with, but you don't know how to explain it. You don't know how to put it into words. So when you're in school and there is anti-Black racism, you know that it's racism, but you don't know where it comes from. And it helps to know where it comes from, but it also helps to know how to articulate it. And that with the help of your educators, and that with the help of your parents and of your community. So the experience we have in school is just as important as building on your foundation and building a strong person who wants to contribute to the world and contribute to their community. And we're really excited to engage you in this next clip, and it deals with mental illness and racism in youth, a subject that touches all of us. On camera, you will see Jason Kennikar, who is the principal of a junior public high school. You'll see Coach Gada, who is a therapist at Heaven's Smile Center, and Simone Donaldson, a social worker, and all in conversation with Rosemary Sadlier, social justice advocate. What is really important about this, or what you're going to see on this clip and hear, are the intersection between race, mental health, and school outcomes. And then how to deal with supportive and non-supportive educators, which we know can make and break a situation. And then what are the therapies that could encourage and support mental health and the building of resilience is in youth? And we are all involved in this, whether we have children or not, because what our youth take in today in the school environment is the youth that we have and young adults of tomorrow.
In my work in schools, I see a real intersection between race, mental health, and school outcomes. From your vantage, what are the things we should be considering when thinking about race, mental health, and schooling?
Do you want me to start? So I could start. I thought, I didn't want to be talking again, but I'll definitely go ahead. So, yeah, mental health and race, the intersection is very, very real, very much connected. So again, in my practice, I do primarily focus on the Black community, but of course, I've worked with the racialized community for many, many years. And one thing that I often have to unpack and support people around is what we call racial microaggressions. So racial microaggressions essentially is like intentional and intentional ways in which we communicate to racialized folks, negative attitudes toward them. They don't belong here, indignities, things that really make them feel as though they are truly less than. This happens in subtle ways more often than not, and this is why they call it micro, although of course the impact is far from micro. It's quite huge at impact. And so we also talk about, and so this could lead to what we call racial trauma as well. And what makes racial trauma very different than, for instance, post-traumatic stress disorder is that this is an everyday occurrence that folks are having to address and deal with. And you could only imagine if you're constantly being told you don't belong, you're not good enough, something is wrong with you and your culture. You only are able to move this far in this world. You know what I mean? You're not sophisticated enough. Even something as small as your hair is not beautiful enough and it needs to be straightened, to if you wear that traditional clothing, you're not all of a sudden professional. We have to really think about these things and what are the messages that it's telling our racialized youth and their families. And what's interesting, it really does start to happen from a very young age because, again, all of what's around us. So once again, I go back to my example of like, what are the books that we're using that are telling our children that they actually don't matter in these educational sessions, that their opinions, their views, their ways of being aren't as important or valued. So what this can do is cause a huge, so we talk about internalized racism as well. And so this is the idea that once again, you as a racialized person, you are inferior, something is wrong with you. And it really just strips away that ethnic identity, that racialized identity. And for many of our students and or adults, when unresolved especially, can lead to things like low self-esteem. So the constant questioning of oneself, this idea that I can only do so many things, or maybe we even get socialized into certain things like basketball, right? Like we see our young Black boys often being streamed into sports versus academics. So these are the things that could happen. And so sometimes what will happen is our youth might work 10 times harder, which is not fair because that means more stress, right, on them in order to succeed, or they'll lose motivation because they feel like, okay, well, this is what I've been told is my place in this world, in this earth. And so this is as far as I can go, right? And so it really plays on our psyche, our mental health, how we see ourselves, and ultimately what we can accomplish both in school and for our careers long term. So I think when we talk about the intersection of race and mental health, it's so important to continuously have these conversations because truly it is an everyday experience, whether it's because of the anxiety a parent has to, think about when their child is walking to school and the possibility of being pulled over from the police, or them being in the classroom and not feeling as though they're smart enough to put up their hands, and or whether their comments are valuable. It's such a integral part, unfortunately, in addressing racism that we have to keep talking about.
Absolutely. I echo everything you have said, Simone. Mental health and racism are very interlinked. Racism can cause or like aggravate what's like if there is any mental health issues before, it can affect both the mental health and physical health. So people can suffer from stress and stress related disorder, and then depression. Maybe they tend to have substance abuse, and then probably suicide. And I have seen it even like as a medical professional. And then it affects overall their academic also performance. So they tend to have probably lower score because they don't feel belong to the school, or they can't participate enough. They can have also dropping out of school, not finishing high school, not going to college, affecting their career. And in my practice as well, what I've seen, as Simon mentioned, lower self-esteem, lower self-confidence, and their ability to have choices in their life. So it's not only at that particular time of their life, the impact might be lifelong. So that's what we need to think about it when we think about racism and mental health.
Well, thank you so much for those responses. They're, you're covering everything. But I think that it's important for us to continue to ask you some of these questions that we have, even though some of the replies tend to be reinforcing each other. And I see that we are getting some comments, so I'm looking forward to the discussion afterwards. And please don't hesitate to put your questions or comments into the chat box. The next question. Students do spend a lot of time interacting with their teachers. And I mean, this is, let's talk COVID and pre-COVID. They're with them or with some educator for perhaps 6 hours a day, give or take. Having worked in many schools, I have encountered teachers who are both challenging in their handling and perspectives of non-white students, as well as those who are allies in terms of anti-racism. What advice would you provide a student, a parent, or a fellow teacher in dealing with educators, the supportive ones and the not so supportive ones?
I would start with this. I think the most important thing is having a safety culture where everyone can like share their thoughts and red flag anything wrong within this culture, and promoting a culture of inclusion. Having sets of rule and expectation from everyone. So this is the school, this is the rules. No racism is allowed by any means, as well as allowing students and their families to speak up if they notice any unwanted behavior, and also promoting and supporting any anti-racism behavior within the school. Those are the things that come into my mind.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes. So similar to my colleague, I do, once again, I think it's so important that we continue to remember that racism is truly systemic. It's not an individual issue per se, right? It starts really from the top down. And so I say that purposely because I do think as much as it would be great for our students to have skills and tips, as much as it'd be great for our parents and our educators to have tips and skills and different ways in approaching these things, we do truly need to create a culture of safety, as my colleague mentioned. We do need to put things in place that actually create that safety so people feel they can actually say something, right? Because if there's nothing else, once again, that racism has done, it's silenced folks. It's made them feel as though what they're saying isn't worthy. Oftentimes, people are feeling as though if they say something, then they're going to be penalized for it, or they're going to be labeled with those words that we talked about earlier: the angry Black mother, the aggressive young boy. Like, all these different things are going to be put into account. So I do think first and foremost it needs to start from the powers that be. So whether it is the sorry, I don't remember the name of those who are outside of the schools, but the superintendents, it needs to start with them. It needs to start with the principals. It needs to start with all the admin staff, all those who are truly in power positions that can create those spaces. So that might mean having a specific equity team that is on board there, so that there's no biases from like internally, right? And that also helps with accountability. However, I will say, of course, there's things that we would love for our students to do when they feel safe and comfortable to do so, which is to speak to someone who they feel comfortable with. And that goes back again, to be quite honest, to spaces where they feel safe to do so. And not just an administrative per se, but someone that truly is skilled and learned in equity issues or anti-Black racism specific issues, as an example. For the parents, we also want them to be able to support their youth, and if they're not feeling heard or seen or valued, I would highly recommend that they, go to agencies such as community health centers who have social workers there, and other agencies externally, to get an advocate, a social worker, someone who could really support them to move through that process. Because, to be quite honest, it's quite tiring, and sometimes it's also re-traumatizing to go through the process of trying to get the support. And then for educators who are actually a little more helpful, what I would say is continue to speak up, because true allyship isn't just about stating that you recognize that there's something wrong, but it really is an action-oriented kind of identity or role that you take on. And so I think that is what needs to happen. And I think there's very, there's very particular ways to go about that. But I do think speaking up and being action-oriented is kind of what has to happen in order for things to change, and for folks to change their behavior when they're actually not treating youth and or their families very well.
Well, thank you. Those were excellent responses, and it's certainly generating some comments in the chat, which we will get to, but we've got a couple more questions before we get to that. So Jason, could you go ahead and give your last question?
Yes, and just before that, I'd like to just touch upon, I think, an important point that was raised. When we do these kinds of sessions tonight and we talk about empowering parents, that's exactly what we're doing, because through building our own understanding and awareness and educating ourselves on what's happening in the education system in terms of racism and its impact on mental health, that way you can have a better conversation and hold people accountable. I welcome when parents come and they cite their concerns to me. It shows to me that you're a concerned stakeholder. Nobody's going to care more about your child than you, right? And it's us working together in partnership, family and school, that will get those positive outcomes that we seek. But please, I say to parents that are listening, if you are seeing the school engaged in actions that you feel are not supportive, that you feel are perpetuating racist stereotypes, that are not challenging things that need to be challenged in society, then have conversations with your child's teacher. If you're not feeling you're getting traction there, talk to the principal. If you're a parent at my school, come and talk to me. We got to work together as partners, and it's really important to be comfortable to hold people accountable.
Sorry, can I tell you one thing you just did there? I think that sometimes as parents, before you ask your question, but something you said just sparked something. I think that sometimes as parents, we want our kids to tell us about how their day went in terms of the academics, but we aren't maybe probing a little bit more to find out about other things that might be going on for them. Because we might have our own level of discomfort and whatnot. And I think that we need to be able to do both. We need to be able to notice that there's something not right going on at our child's school, but we also have to empower our child to be able to share what they are seeing and what's a cause of concern for them. Whether it's a racist stereotype in a book or something that happened in the schoolyard, so that we have that information, those examples to bring forward.
Yes, and another thing, every school has what's called a school improvement plan, and an integral part of that plan is the work that the school is doing around equity, promoting a level, fair playing field so that all students can be successful. And as a parent, I encourage you, ask the staff at the school, ask your child. Your child should be able to articulate to you, what is the school's improvement plan in equity? There should be conversations about it throughout the school, in the classroom. There should be no confusion on what that goal is and how the school is working to achieve that goal. So right now, I know in many schools, mine included, we have a real focus on confronting anti-Black racism. Hence my participation in this event, encouraging parents to come out. So make sure that you understand what your school's equity goal is and what your school is doing to achieve that goal. That is important.
Yeah, that's really, really important. I'm so glad that you both brought those points together, right? Because I do think, of course, if we could work with the school as much as possible, we want to do that, understand the different things that are in place, because truly it's about building the community and not just individuals. And if one family or one individual is being impacted by this, then likely a few or a lot, majority are, right? And I love the point that Rosemary made around parents being intentional, because you're right. Until we ask those specific questions, sometimes we don't get those specific answers. And I think to start having those conversations at home, to both empower and open up that conversation so they know they're not alone and that what they're experiencing is very real is actually quite important. Because in Canada, it's very subtle, it's very much entrenched in our systems, and so we often can't see it even as adults when it's happening, right? So I do encourage, just like Rosemary stated, having those conversations regularly needs to be a part of that process to healing. Absolutely.
Good points. One more thing to add is related to Rosemary's point. I always teach families to ask their kids, tell me at the end of the day, what's 3 good things and 3 not good things happen at school. That will open a whole total different of discussion, and you can tap on into different things more than the academic part.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I would just like to add that we can't begin to heal the harm unless we acknowledge that harm exists. And while none of us wanted this to be the case, we really honor the name of George Floyd because his sacrifice, his example, his murder really raised awareness and made it even more possible to have some of the courageous conversations that we are beginning to have with greater frequency. I hope you'll stay tuned and enjoy this with us.
just enough? When will the next mile be the last mile? Don't matter, we know that we're tough. When will your last word be the last word? When will we cast aside these chains? When will the last one be the last one? 'Cause we are counting up the names.
Botham Jean,
Janet Wilson,
Bobby Ross, Betty Jones,
Kaylin Rokert,
Maya Hall,
Eric Reason, Natasha McKenna,
Akai Gurley, Tatiana Jefferson,
Alton Sterling,
Ayana Stanley Jones, Amadou Diallo,
Brianna Taylor,
Clifford Glover, Darnisha Harris,
Dante Parker,
Catherine Johnston, Derek Scott,
Kendra James,
Dontre Hamilton, Melissa Williams,
Eric Garner,
Miriam Carey, Eric Harris,
Pamela Turner,
Ezell Ford, Rikia Boyd,
Freddie Gray,
Sandra Bland, Jerame Reed,
Chantel Davis,
John Crawford III, Shelley Frey,
Laquan McDonald,
Tanisha Anderson, Michael Brown,
Tarika Wilson and a 1-year-old child,
Nicholas Hayward Jr., Taisha Miller,
Philando Castile,
Yvette Smith, Philip White,
Charlena Lyles,
Remain Brisbane, Michelle Cousseau,
Sean Bell,
George Floyd, Stefan Clark,
Rashard Brooks,
Tamir Rice, Alteria Woods,
Terrence Crutcher,
Alexia Christian, Tony Robinson.
Walter Scott,
Just in the past 8 years, nearly 8,000 Black people have died at the hands of police. Say their names again and again because Black lives matter. They must matter, and they do matter.
when will the last time be the last time? Or will enough be just enough? When will the next mile be the last mile? Don't matter, we know that we're tough. When will your last word be the last word? When will we cast aside this chain? When will the last one be the last one? 'Cause we are counting up the names.
We certainly hope that you found that panel discussion to be inspiring and enlightening. Opportunities to discuss the harms that have impacted our identities, our academic achievement, are things that start early in our experience. And we certainly have just begun to touch the surface of some of those connections and harms. I hope that we'll be hearing some of your questions at the end of this event so that we can share in what we've learned and share in steps that we can consider going forward. Coming up now is Sagely Archer. Canadian-born Sagely Archer has been honing her career for the past 10 years. She was born in Mississauga, which is in the west end of Toronto, essentially. And she's had time to establish a unique aura of musical inspirations. Her influences vary from Lauryn Hill, John Mayer and Maxwell, to Janet Jackson, Luther Vandross, and Prince. Blending soul-infused lyrics, old school instrumentation, and pop hooks, she intertwines the conscious with the current. Enjoy Sagely.
They say love is not an anomaly. We just have imagery and physicality. But I want more than one single lane. I won't let you smash the first time. Need more than 10 deadlines if you wanna be mine. I need more than sex, and I need more than drugs. I don't want this world's definition of love. I need more than sex. I need more than drugs. I don't want your head over heart. It's not enough, baby. Tell me what's happening. My love, what's happening? My love, what's happening? More love and happiness. Tell me what's happening. My love, what's happening? My love, what's happening? More love and happiness. And still they say, young folks, that we don't give a damn or care about who rules the world or about what we wear. Truth is that we do. We'll keep pushing through. Truth is that we'll rise. The truth is that we'll rise. 'Cause we want more than one single good life. So I say something you can't define. All that I am and all I can be. 'Cause I see more than sex and I see more than drugs. I don't want this world's definition of love. And I think more than self, and I think more than wealth. I won't let your heart take the message that I dispel. Baby, tell me what's happening. I love what's happening. I love what's happening. More love and happiness. Tell me what's happening. I love what's happening. I love what's happening. More love and happiness. Too negligent for me. 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 Tell me what's happening. I love what's happening. I love what's happening. More love and happening? My love, what's happening? My love, what's happening? Want love and happiness, baby.
Hello. I would just like to offer my sincere thanks to ASALH, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, and the ASALH International Committee for the opportunity to share with you on Black history in Canada and its connections globally, in support also of the 26th annual National Commemoration of Black History Month in Canada. I want to thank ComFest Film and Arts Festival that finds itself in Toronto for their hosting support of this event. I want to thank Jennifer Holness for generously providing us with the trailer of Subjects of Desire, and also the York University Gospel Choir for that phenomenal interpretation of Kirk Franklin's Lift Every Voice and Sing. Additionally, the participants in the panel discussion, thank you so much. And to you, Julia, thank you for being such an able and amenable co-host.
Oh, thanks, Rosemary, and thank you too. It's been fun working on this with you and working on with us all on this international program. But most of all, I would love to thank all of the listeners, people that tune in, whether you tune in when we do it live or you tune in into the future. We hope that this brings you lots of food for thought and discussion. So take it home, take it around the dinner table, take it around the bar table, wherever you do discussions, and we hope you can keep this going.
So now that we've thanked everyone, now that we've presented everything that we can possibly present in the short time that we wanted to keep you, we want to hear from you. We will be opening up the chat to try to reply to all of the questions that you have provided, and we will be posting this live later for people to watch. Thank you so much again, and now we're going to open up the chat. Everyone, hope that you can see me. I hope that my co-hosts will join the stage so that they can join the live chat that we're now going to have. It was a phenomenal program, and it was certainly my honor, our honor, to work on this with you. And I hope that you were able to take something amazing away from what you were able to see. I've got the producer of the George Lee, and here we are. Thank you, all the way from New York City. Nice to have you.
My pleasure. Can you hear me?
I can. I just am looking for Julia to join the stage, and but until she does, let me just thank you so very much for what you did in terms of your efforts to create that phenomenal short film on George Floyd, and the reminder that we all do have to remember those people who have perished at the hands of the state in ways that are somewhat curious and questionable.
Yes, I think that not only are we reminded daily with new stories, unfortunately, but I think the other key element that you mentioned is the fact that individuals who go through personal turmoil need help and need the opportunity to do better for themselves. And we as a society have the obligation to provide that help. So if someone is dealing with substance abuse, if someone is dealing with a history of bad choices, etc., we just can't say, oh, I'm done. It's just not the way society should work. And I'm proud to say that I'm also on the advisory board of a new nonprofit organization called A Soulful Heart, which was founded by George Floyd's uncle, Selwyn Jones. And you can find it at asoulfulheart.org. A Soulful Heart is committed to helping improve the communication between law enforcement and citizenry, but it's also committed to helping people in general understand where we are for each other and how we can be more helpful to each other. So this video has spawned a whole bunch of things separate from the worldwide attention we've received at film festivals. It's really sparked a discussion, and I'm glad we could include that today.
Thank you so much for having me. I just, sorry, there's a bit of static there. I'm just looking in the chat to see if there are any questions. I don't see. Well, Julia, maybe you should just say a word since you're here now.
Oh, well, thank you everyone for joining us this morning on this subject that it has touched all of us right from our birth and before our birth. So there is that question of not only are we healing the harms within ourselves, but we're trying to heal the harms that have been transmitted through intergenerational trauma, and not to position us always as victims, but being active with the sense of being active now in taking charge of what is going to heal us. And we have these tools in front of us, like this film that we've just seen, like the conversation between Rosemary and the Principal Kennesaw and the social workers. And thank goodness there are so many people now when Rosemary talked about choosing education, choosing that path of education, even if she wasn't directed that way, that certainty of knowing, we want our children to know that certainty, even if it's a requirement to get a job these days, having university education, it's that knowledge in ourselves of, if I go to university or if I get higher education, there's reason for it. And I can help my community, but I can help myself and I can help my ancestors. I can be so there's an expression that says, I'm the best expression of my ancestors' dreams. So we want us to, with what we've seen today, we have in front of us tools for us to go forward, but to spread that to our community and to our young people. But most of all, we start by healing ourselves.
Well, I think one of the things that you said, Julia, and that you also said, Chris, is just the whole idea of, recognizing that there's harm. I think that it's been a stigma for such a very long time that we are harmed. I think that what we're supposed to be is, incredibly strong and unaffected by some of the horrendous things that have happened around us. And from the George Floyd outlines an incredibly egregious end of the racism spectrum. But there are those other things, the microaggressions that also have negative impacts on our daily lives. That's sort of like Monday, right? And so we have to negotiate that on a constant and perpetual basis. And it really doesn't matter what side of the border we're on. These are situations and events and problems that are global. They are American problems. They will happen in Canada. They are not, they don't end at the international border because they are based on racism, anti-Black racism, and white supremacy. But I think that one of the things also that came up, because we started out looking at the beauty element, nobody can control their melanin, it's what it is. But it means so many different things in different places. And I think that people, your comment when you were talking earlier, Julia, about not wanting people to notice you were Black, that was an incredibly functional thing, not so much in large metropolitan communities where there might be a sizable Black population and you had each other's backs. But if you're in a small place or a small neighborhood where you are the only one, you have to find different ways to cope, which has an impact on your identity and your way of functioning. And I don't know about you, Chris, but what do you think about that whole idea about negative impacts of how you look?
Well, you've triggered a whole bunch of things in those comments. So let me try and address them quickly, but separately. First, on the most recent piece, which is the issue of skin color and how it impacts you. I'm somebody who has a very Black father, a very dark-skinned Black father who came from the South in Tennessee. and a very white Brooklyn Jewish mother. And my entire childhood was involved wrestling with this whole identity question for both me and my brothers. And since I'm 63, I'm sort of a little bit more on the front end of the wave of interracial children that has now, that now exists, which is beautiful, but it was different. It was different for the couples who had the children, and it's different for the children themselves. And so I think how you're perceived and how you feel you are perceived. I mean, I remember one Black girl in kindergarten, touching my hair and saying, "You have such good hair." I didn't know what that meant. It was inconceivable to me. And then years later, a girlfriend mentioned it to me, and I said, "What are you talking about? Good hair?" Because in my household, there was no such concept. But I didn't realize we have this whole self-hate thing around hair. And Spike Lee caught it up wonderfully in the movie School Days with that great musical number, Good and Bad Hair. But, that's just the epitome of the self-hate. So that's one piece. The second piece I want to address is this issue of having to cope with each other. One of the things about the video, which I think people feel instinctively, but I do want to highlight, this is about the reaction of Black women to the situation that we face. Yes, women are victimized by police, as I mentioned in the video, just like men are. But the overwhelming number of victims of state-sponsored abuse are male. And it is the women, the daughters, the mothers, the sisters who have to pick up the pieces, who have been picking up the pieces, who have taken all the micro and macroaggressions that existed in our history and found a way, whether it was through faith or through pure love or through hard work or all of the above, have found the way to keep our communities moving forward. And that also crosses borders. That is not unique to America, although it may be a little bit more intense in parts of our nation than in others, but I don't think so. I think that's true for many societies of color who've had to live with this massive experience of white supremacy in the colonial era. So there's that piece which is conveyed in the video, because it is the women, and my star, Wendy Ward, I think is in this conversation somewhere, who is sort of the voice of those women. Wendy, we can't see you. Well, she was there.
I'm going to try and put her on.
And it was very important to have that element. I'm just a little add-on in that video. I'm asking questions, but it is the women who are saying, "You are afraid of me. I'm not afraid of you. You, the law enforcement, you're afraid of my power, of my love, of my capacity to endure and survive. I'm not afraid of you. You anger me, you frustrate me, you pain me. I'm not afraid of you." And I think that's such an important concept. Last but not least, then I'll shut up. This is Black History Month. It's also Valentine's Day next week. And I think it's kind of cool that we have the whole celebration of love in Black History Month. But as someone who's never been to Toronto or the surrounding areas, thank you. But I want to give a shout out to a woman named Pam Hamilton, who I knew when I was in high school because she visited New York, and she was Pam King, who was from Hamilton. And I want to give a shout out to Pam King. Hope she's all right. Hope her family's fine, everything. But just this connection that we have to people, all over the world. And I know some families have much larger families than others. Mine is a little bit chopped up, so I don't know where everybody is. But the reality is we are connected. We are committed to the changes we need to make to improve our nations and our society. And we have to do it through all of the arts and the psychic energy and whatever else we can pull to move ourselves forward. So thank you, and I'll shut up now.
I'm going to just try and bring Wendy. Wendy, if I, try again, I'm going to just try and bring you on while we're talking about this. I'm hitting the button, so I think you have to accept.
See, us old dudes, we're all about, technology.
But while we're waiting for Wendy, there's a comment in the chat, and it's actually from, thank you so much to the International Committee of the ASLH, and we have a member who's participating today. And she says, it is always stunning to learn that Black lived experiences, hey, Wendy, Black
Good morning.
experiences around the world are so similar. We have to get a handle on the colorism lie that has shaped so many people's thinking throughout the years. And, just a quick reminder, no matter how I appear to you, remember in my growing up, I was the darkest person in the room. So, it is, and my mother was the one who was very dark, and my father was the one who shared my melanin deprivation. So, it's all situational, But Wendy, did you want to comment on what you've done here? Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Chris. Actually, in case I didn't say that, thank you for what you did.
You're welcome.
Very powerful.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I absolutely loved your presentation. And just going back to the part about the hair, the interesting thing about that is it continues to be an ongoing issue with Black women, even though we've kind of returned to our roots with natural hair now, because you don't want your hair to be too natural and too out of control, even in this day and age. And as a child growing up, in the 60s, I had a perm since I was 4 years old when I was a very little girl, because my hair was out of control and it was difficult to comb my hair. So that has always been an issue. So the fact that we're able to finally get to the point where we can at least entertain having natural hair is sort of like a relief. So I just wanted to comment on that. In terms of the George Floyd video and that whole issue, I have to thank Chris Owens, because he was the one that involved me in that, and it was such a privilege to be able to do that. But as I look at that whole situation, it's still continuing, and I see all of the names that we've added beyond when we first started doing that presentation, and it's just so sad because it's never ending, and we have to make a change. There's something that we have to do to find a way to make a change, to change this narrative.
Well, I think,
if I may interject,
I'm just going to reinforce the reality that not only is the colorism thing on both sides of the border a continuum, but also there's a Canadian list, and I didn't put those names in, but they exist. And some of them have sparked riots on Yonge Street. Some of them have led to questionable marches, like the recent sudden departure over a balcony of Regis Krasinski Paquette. I mean, there are all kinds of examples here as well. And I think one incredibly horrendous fact is that a Black person in Toronto is 20 times more likely to be killed at the hands of police than any other racial group. And as you said, Chris, it's usually going to be a Black man.
If I may add to that is a stunning statistic. Really, really stunning. Wendy's a bit modest. She says I involved her in this project. The reason why I involved her in this project is because we met literally almost 50 years ago, when she was a student.
He's outing you.
We're perennially 29. We got that.
Yes,
but she was preparing to go to medical school. Wendy is a doctor. She spent 12 years as a doctor in anesthesiology and community health, and so she's somebody who has dealt with the full range of what our community has to offer, and she has left the formal part of that to start her own work, helping women in particular and children who need the sort of psychological and other forms of self-healing and empowerment that we all need. So Wendy's modest. She happens to be a great songwriter and a great singer, but she is part of the wave of change that we are experiencing in our community. People stepping up and saying, you know what? We don't need to take this. We don't need to live with this. We can overcome, pardon the choice of very corny words, but we can overcome both individually and collectively. And so, Wendy, I salute you. And I just want to make sure everybody knows Wendy is a lot more than a singer. She is a whole incredible person who's really contributed to our community.
Thank you so much, Chris. Yes, and as Chris says, it was more like a calling. I had been a physician for almost 30 years, but I'll take the 12 years because it makes me seem a lot younger.
Yeah, fine.
I mean, you don't have to add that to the list. There's already racism, colorism, and classism, and then ageism too.
Ageism, yeah.
Most definitely. But it was more like a calling. I'm a solutions person. And even in the health field, and both parents, my mom being a teacher who taught in socioeconomically disadvantaged areas coming up, my dad is a doctor as well, and he practiced in those same types of areas. So I was very aware of what was going on from a very early age. And being in medicine myself and serving those communities in addition, I just felt that I could do so much more. I had many other talents, and solutions needed to be provided. So as Chris mentioned, it's really about providing stress management. I know you all spoke about the stress that we endure based on all these things that are going on in our community. And stress management is a huge thing. And it's a huge part of what I do, along with success training. Because if we don't change the mind of young people and the minds of women, we're never going to change the narrative, because it's a lack of confidence in ourselves. There's a lack of belief in ourselves that is so pervasive. That's the mindset needs to be changed, and how we view ourselves. And I was doing a panel with some young high school students, and we had a group of Black women. All of us had higher education beyond college. And afterwards, we had a discussion among ourselves, and we spoke about how scarred we are. Even though we have higher education, we have good jobs, we're so scarred from coming up through this whole system of being made to feel less than. It's amazing that even with all of our accomplishments, we still somehow don't feel like we've arrived.
If I can add to that, this morning I listened to a program on Radio Quebec with a speaker. Her name was Rachel Decosse. She's in Ottawa. And the program was about Black hair and what is the problematic for Black women, and what other people outside of the race need to know about it. And I found, and it was an excellent program. And Rachel brought up a lot of interesting points. One of which was this need for in learning to accept Black hair and to have to explain it, which I found a little bit questionable, that we even actually have to explain ourselves. But the fact is that there's the need to love yourself, and then you love your hair, and goes vice versa. And that's all part of that becomes part of the process. It's the loving of oneself. And it's not too late for us as older people, but this has got to be undertaken for younger people. And we see more and more children's books focused on the hair. Did you see that Oscar-nominated film about that Black father combing his daughter's hair?
Yes.
But the fact that hair, it's not a trend. Going back to natural hair or accepting your Black hair is not a trend. It's a necessity for us. But the fact is to have a choice. We can wear our hair whichever way we want to. And I wanted to add as well that the idea that we are in Canada, that Rosemary can give a long list of names of Black men and women who have been suffered at the hands of police or outside in society, in the larger society. We thought here in Canada that Canada wasn't like that, but of course we know what it is. We know that we have to look over our shoulders, the same as anybody else, and that we're not any different than the United States. But I do a lot of work in Europe as well, and so we are not. There's no big difference between us and them and all of us. So we may see that we're in different countries, but those geopolitical boundaries have fallen. And especially you see that with the Black Lives Matter movement and how it spread all over the world, like everywhere. There is solidarity. There's a desire for that solidarity, and it's among Black people, people of color, but other people, but white people as well. So I think we have to bring down the barriers and come together as a force, which is what is in I think it's one of the outcomes of the Black Lives Matter, but also the pandemic that we people are able to come together globally through hybrid events like what we're having right now. So we're seeing change, and we're going to push that forward and use the tech tools that we have now. but also the ability to travel and see other people and be with other people of other cultures and see what is going on for them and see that our problems are their problems are our problems, and we're here to solve it together.
I think, Julia, the international aspect of this that you just highlighted is so critical. We take it for granted in some ways, but at the same time, we're ignorant of it. And I will plead guilty to being ignorant of it to some degree. When we made the George Floyd video, it was just a music video, kind of. We were like, oh, it's too long to be your regular average music video. It's 7 minutes long. It's depressing, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, well, that's what people told us. Said, oh, it's too long. We can't put this in regular rotation. So we figured, what do we do with it? And somebody mentioned short films, and I had no idea that there were all these short film festivals and things like that. And I found out there were thousands of them around the world. So we have literally entered this video into nearly 700 film festivals.
Wonderful.
And out of those 700, about 350 have selected it to be viewed. Another 150 have honored us with some kind of award, with quarterfinalists or higher. And we've actually won over 50 contests, and around the world, from Bhutan to Canada to, wherever. And the reason why is because it is speaking that message to folks who feel this oppression of being different and being singled out because you're different by the powerful, by the majority. And so whether you live in another country and you may not necessarily have Black people as we define it, but you may have another minority that they're being oppressed, all right? People are hearing that and they're understanding we need to say no. And that for me, that's what this whole video was about. And it has definitely been an eye-opener.
One of the comments just on that, Chris, indicates that the truth of our shared history is the remedy to changing perspectives for those who are willing to receive and accept the truth. And I think that is, really part of it. We do have a shared history. I just have to show you this. Can you see this is my breakfast today. This is my what
is it? What is it, Rosemary?
It is a raisin bran muffin. And I had a meeting with, I'm not going to name call, but I had a meeting with an American person last evening. And I thought, okay, I cannot eat this now. I have to take this with me, take my stars and stripes with me, just as a reminder that we do have this connection. This is the longest, relatively unprotected border in the world. And, we have things that have happened historically from the founding of Chicago and Detroit by an African person, the reality that there were coureurs de bois or fur traders in the 1400s who were African on both sides of the border. I mean, we have been connected and Black for a long time. So, that we're here and still having to work on dealing with our reality in ourselves, in our melanin and in our hair and in our features is unfortunate, but it's a reminder too, just like Black History Month is a reminder too, that it's a point, it's a thing but it's never finished. It's a process that we have got to constantly be working on. And I think that is, for me, what you're saying, Chris, what you're saying, Wendy, what you're saying, Julia, at the end of the day, it's a reminder that this is a relay and not a sprint, and in every aspect, unfortunately. Well, I think we are at the end of our time because I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat. Unless you
still have 12 people. We still have 12 people there. I'm very impressed.
Well, we won't talk about the numbers because what will happen later is that it's going to be rebroadcast and it will reach more people. I think that for a lot of people, the platform access is a bit of a challenge, but here we are nevertheless, and it is being recorded, so it will be saved for posterity.
And it will be shown on Asala TV, the Association for the Study of American Life and History, on February the 24th at, I believe it's 8 p.m. So
Yes.
if you go to the YouTube channel of Asala TV, you will be able to rewatch this again. And but there will also be during that whole week from the 20th to the 28th programs from the international partners of Asala. So we'll have a program from Scotland, from England, from Filipinos, from the Philippines, from South Africa, from Canada. So if you want to get a more global view on Black History Month across the world, tune into the program. There's some excellent programs on it.
And I'd like to thank Sandy DeFreitas. I know she's on, but may not necessarily want to come to the stage. It was through her that we were able to configure this program today, and it's through her and ComFest, Global Community Film Festival, that we are able to access this platform, which we greatly appreciate. The program wouldn't have happened otherwise. And I encourage you to support everybody that's been part of this event as much as you can. ComFest, if you know, certainly your film is something that has been featured in their film festival. Chris, I wish you nothing but good luck going forward in any other project you may be working on. Julia, in your tours, Wendy, in your future activism, and I'm here doing Black History Talks and Black History Tours and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Consulting. So
thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming, and thank you to our
wonderful program
panel here.
Thank you.
And thank you so much to Sandy.
Wonderful meeting you all.
Yes, indeed. Wonderful meeting you as well.
Nice to meet you
Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye for now.